Afternoon. Welcome everybody to Conservation Heritage Advisory Committee. Good to see you all. You've got the agenda in front of you. We're just going to shuffle the order a little bit shortly due to conflicts of interest. But thanks for attending today. We've got a couple of apologies. I have here Max and Carol Craven and Chris Ward. Lindsay, anybody else?
That's all.
Since then, that's it, I think. Thank you very much. Declarations of interest. I'm afraid I've got to declare an interest in two projects, the Duke of Clarence and the Friargate project, 16 to 17 Friargate.
I've got Anchorage Road at Mickleover, not my scheme, but associated with the company.
Indeed. Any other declarations of interest amongst you? And okay, and because of that, we're going to recast the agenda slightly. So we're going to start with the project, leave the room, and then we'll run the other three, and then we'll take the Duke of Clarence and then Friargate last. So I'll leave the room. Probably won't come back at that point, so I'll ask Paul to close the meeting.
Yep.
So I hope that's okay. So turning to the minutes then of the last meeting, 7th of December. I hope everybody's had the chance to look at those and your content of those. Any comments? Lee, you happy to accept those as a true record? Yes from you. Again, items the last meeting you had the list. But that's really there just for your information. If you want to likewise, applications are not being considered today. Short list of those. So I think that takes us on to applications to be considered. So, as I say, we'll start with thanks, Paul. Try and remember to call you back in.
There's two applications regarding land adjacent to Vicky Road in Nickel. Both the listed building application and the planning application. It's regarding a change of use of the barns into 3 residential dwellings along with the erection of 6 linked dwellings. The farmhouse is Grade 2 listed, and obviously the attached curtilage walls and barns form part of the listing as curtilage as per the Act. There are a number of other listed buildings nearby, such as the Grade 2 star listed Church of All Saints, Mickleover, Grade 2 Road, and Grade 2 listed Mickleover Manor. Buildings and land are also located within the Mickleover Conservation Road. So just running through, there is some information that is missing as part of this picture. So first slide, showing the location. Here on some elevation photographs of the barns in question. The photograph shows the view of the church, the farmhouse on the right and the barns on the left. So here's the existing site and the proposed site plan. So as you can see, 2 rows of barns, buildings. There's a proposed garage block which runs parallel to those, and then the 2 pairs of dwellings, houses. This picks up the key vista to All Saints Church. Not any existing plans for existing elevations. So what we've got here is the proposed elevations, and there's no information on the inside features and in terms of very limited purchase statement. The other two-storey barn on the side, which you would have seen on the website. Information about it. Graded panels, artificial blue-grey plain tiles, 2 barns, timber, new houses. So here are the barn, so rear elevation, and some rear elevation to plots 6 and 7 to 9.
Thank you, Chloe. Yeah, so I think it's 9 dwellings in all, including the barn conversions. There's 2 barns to be converted, plus new new build wrapping around, all on the existing green space associated with Manor Farm. Manor Farm listed, as you say, in the church. You get the view from the Vicarage Road through the gap to the church tower, which is grade 2-star. And then beyond the manor estate. So that's the proposal. There are a couple of comments that have been made. Chris Ford, who can't be here today, sent a very brief comment, which I'll read out, which is this proposal affects an area close to the heart of the village, and as a result may affect buried archaeological remains. A full archaeological field evaluation is necessary. Did also have some comments from Max, so I don't know whether you're going to speak on behalf of the Civic Society.
He's not asked me to.
Shall I just
read about it?
Shall I give the thrust or read the whole thing?
Well, just praise it.
So in essence, there's significant concern from Max on behalf of the Civic Society. Beyond any, in terms of any renovation, beyond any renovation of the barns. So I think there's a kind of suggestion that the barns might be sensitively converted, but any building on the land around the Manor Farm, he's taking issue with, on the basis that that's kind of contributing to the setting of the listed farm and sense of green space, which then links to the church. He also goes on to say that it needs a heritage impact assessment to properly on the heritage assets, and strongly objects on that basis. So, yeah, the area was part of the common fields of the village, includes the vestiges of the Ridge and Furrow headlands. There's this line of sight through from Manor Farm to the church and he sees that as a happy survival. Preservation is something more than that, a narrow visual corridor. So that's the thrust of his comments. So comments, please. Chris, thank you.
Yeah, I thought there were some details that are respectful of the site, the design, material, and an attempt to retain an important viewpoint. I think so. So those are the positives, I think, of the scheme. The problem for me though is that the character of a conservation area is often made up of building spaces between them, and this is a very good example of an important open area that contributes greatly to the character of the conservation area, the setting of listed buildings. It's a proposal that really fills that space almost entirely. Whether there's an opportunity to have some development beyond the conversion of the ponds, but not it is, you know, it is that there could be some retention of the sense of openness and the setting of the buildings. It's the intensity of the development that really means that it ought to be something we can get to. There was just one matter of detail. I couldn't actually see how the vehicular access to achieve to the maybe that's just the way I was reading to the garage for plots 1 to 3.
I think
farmhouse. I wasn't quite sure how he actually got to that.
Yeah, I think
that's a minor detail.
No, absolutely fine. I think the primary access is to the, if you're standing on Vicarage Road looking at Manor Farm, to the right of the farm building. I think there's a secondary access on the left of the farm building that takes you up past the barns to the garage.
Just see how
that right,
yeah, but that's really a secondary issue for me.
There's a concern in terms of the quantum and the fact that there's no kind of vestiges of green space left.
It's the sense of openness
Pretty much filling aside.
and the contribution that makes to the character of the area.
Yeah. Okay.
I made exactly the same notes when I looked at it. Looked the balance of the open space or development, which is basically what we've just been talking about. And the other one was could the forms and scale of the proposed house types be more in keeping with the existing barn conditions? I was thinking that, you know, the layout and the, say, 1.5 stories probably maximum, you know, this, you know, that sort of barn type proportion rather than the house type like we've shown at the moment with big gables and big chimneys and things. Yeah, it's not. I didn't think it was quite in character with the farm type aesthetic. And going on, Chris, I think a reduced skin, perhaps behind the existing stables on that side, be enough on that side.
I would leave the open area.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's like you don't actually perceive that space. Do you? You do get that. You do get that view. Sort of more widely hearing views of perhaps in the churchyard, you get some sense of that connectivity of green farm play.
There is a footpath.
And on the church as well.
Yeah.
There is a hedge. There's a gated access. It's quite narrow. It's along the side.
Okay, any other comments?
One comment that I make is that mentioned that we have no details of the interiors of the farms. I think that probably is important. Know if there's anything of significance within the farms. So,
Yeah, fair enough. I think that there is a lack of information in relation to the existing barns. I don't think we've even got elevations of them as existing. So it's
yeah, so
just in terms of comparing what's proposed with what's there now, it's not made easy. So yeah, more information would be. Anybody else? So I'm taking that. I mean, as you say, that in terms of the positives, I mean, it's clearly a kind of bespoke scheme. It's not just something trying to put some house types on the site. So
Oh, yeah.
there's been some consideration given to this, and the sense that preserving that visual corridor to get the tower connection is laudable, but I think there's scope to do more in terms of making that green link much clearer. So I think there's a concern from the committee in terms of the quantum of development, the fact that every available bit of the site's being filled essentially, which does result in the loss of that green space, which contributes to the setting A of the farm and B of the church and beyond. So it sounds like there's a sense in the room that there may be a scheme that allows a little bit more in terms of new build to complement the conversion of the barns, but not to this degree, so that there's still some sort of meaning to the site in terms of the sense of openness. So I think on that basis, it's an objection as it stands from the committee on the basis that if, as currently proposed, it could result in harm to the setting of those heritage assets and completely, have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area. But we think that there may be a scheme in there to be discussed further should the applicants want to consider that. But as it stands, it's an objection. Okay, Lindsay. Thank you.
Get it back, please.
Thanks, Paul. Okay. Moving on to item 243A, Saddlegate.
This proposal in the planning applications within the city centre conservation area, 43 Saddlegate. The proposal was originally version of this building, but they have changed the proposal, the demolition of the existing structure, and erection of the 4-storey apartment building. So that's why it's been brought for you. In terms of this building, the conservation area, obviously it's behind 2 to 40, the Strand and the Arcade, which are grade 2. So obviously on Saddlegate, the nearest listed building is 48 Saddlegate, which is 2-star and way away. And there's very minimal heritage statement. So these are the photographs of the building and its location behind 43 elevations and floor plan, existing building, and structural engineers report, which you will have seen on site. This is the proposal for a 4-storey building, windows and door, black PVC, external walls, off-white render, second and third floor walls, black metal sheets, steel. Floor plans, accommodation, and is the same on all 4 floors in terms of the layout, and 2-bedroom shower, shared room. Section, which you will have seen. So the underlay is an existing building. The new building, obviously with a heavier line over the top, showing the comparison in heights and width.
Thanks, Chloe. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things absent. There's not, they haven't provided any drawings that show this in context. So it's quite hard to see how this relates to the kind of post in the front. All we've got is that kind of section elevation that shows it behind where the ridge is very slightly lower. Sorry, Chloe, you might just go back to that. Yeah, the ridge is very slightly lower. Of course, the eaves is quite a bit higher. So, we're not really getting the full picture here. And I think the supporting information is a bit sparse in terms of content and depth to demonstrate understanding. So it also talks a lot about conversion, and it's not a conversion. I think it started life as a conversion of the existing building, which is broadly on the same footprint. But this is a new build, 4 stories instead of 2. I do have a comment before I open up the discussion from Chris Wardley again, who simply says he would endorse the comments made by the County Archaeological Service, but regret that reports on the historic building and survey and field evaluation, which have clearly taken place, have not been supplied. So I think that's another highlighting again, there's some missing information here. And just to reiterate, in terms of the materials and finishes, render UPVC windows and metal cladding, vertical cladding and metal roof, as I understand it. Okay, so comments, please. Who's going first?
I'll comment if you want.
Yeah, go on.
I mean, I think that if you look at elevation, it's I'm not sure if it had been 3 stories of render and a mansard rather than 4 story. So I think there's a bit of work to do. There's quite a lot of buildings in that area that have got mansards on the top. So to sort of reduce the effective height of the building, the 2 stories of metal cladding on the top look really heavy to me. I don't think there's much metal cladding around that area. So, you know, I think that needs to be looked at with plans.
Yes. So everybody happy? Does anybody want to be looking at the drawings while we're talking? I think.
To remove the drawings.
Yeah, I think we've got to balance this between having a discussion where we can be seen, where the drawings can be seen. We can't have both. Is that right? Try and manage without. Okay. Chris, thank you.
Very much echo Ian's comments. The palette of materials is not chosen in regard. That's an issue, particularly the metal cladding. Not anyway. In fact, there's very little information really in aspect of the site surroundings. But one thing that I always feel is that the back buildings to be subservient to the frontage building, sort of, and often are, and in this case, it's a 2-story back building, as I understand. You know, some sort of a 4-story back building. You know, sort of doesn't feel to be the right relationship on the site as a whole.
No.
So an issue really with the height of the idea, you know, in suggestion that sort of outside treatment would rectify the problem sufficiently for me. But, you know, I think it's building development stories.
Just to be clear,
Yeah.
Ian, did you mean that height with a mansard roof?
Well, I thought about it should be 3 stories. Maximum.
One of which is a
It's a
mansard.
2-story and then a mansard.
Yeah, I thought.
So, yeah, you see, you're out of the.
Yeah, that would be an improvement, without a doubt. Yeah, I misunderstood. To be same on main 4th story. So that would, yes, that would be an improvement. To 3. Yes, I think it's the intensity, but also the lack of, in terms of demonstrating the heritage aspects of being considered in the scheme.
Okay, thank you. We'll take Paul first of all. David.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a disintegration of hierarchy of scale there because you've got buildings at the front and the section that is shown in relation to that is quite deceiving. The new building is detached and there should be this hierarchy of scale between the land at the back, which after all still follows the pattern of the medieval grain city, and it's quite an important feature. So if we were starting to accept large scale buildings like that in the back area, I feel it would actually compromise not only the buildings at Southgate, but also the buildings on the Strand as well. So no, it's not sensitive, and it's architecturally the fenestration is not very sensitive to the it could be a nice, delicate little modern building in there, but not at that scale, and slightly more sensitive.
Well, first of all, sorry, the lack of heritage statement
No, it's fine.
worries me. We ought to know more about the history of the site and the significance to the building itself. Also, there seems to be no justification for demolition as such. If maybe the building can't be saved in its existing form. Again, I can't see any justification for anything more than the 2 stories that there are at the moment. And it's already been said, you know, it's that proportion of scale. 2-story building would be in keeping.
There is a structural report. So is there?
All right.
But,
Basically condensed building.
No, that's good. Well, on the basis that it can't be saved, then I think something of a similar scale.
Yeah, just wanted to reiterate some of the points already raised. I noted that, did it say that the heritage statement needed to be updated? There was that issue. I think could do better in terms of materials and an understanding of how it's going to look in situ, bearing in mind the important area that we're talking about.
I agree with that. I'm struggling to put buildings around it, and I would like, you know, to have seen a photograph with this imposed, because I think this could be horrendous. I mean, black, really? And those windows, nothing like anything in the area. It would just stick out. I was going to say like a sore thumb, but I've got a sore thumb. But, you know, it's, I just can't see that they've even looked at the area. Really.
You're absolutely right. There is an intimacy of scale at the back.
Yes.
Those buildings, which is really quite quaint, and
Which is commercially important. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And there have been schemes for redeveloping that area,
Yeah.
none of which have come to fruition yet. But if you do something like that, I think you'd actually destroy the chance of those schemes being.
It would set a horrible precedent.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Definitely no go.
any other comments? No? He's had a say. So in summary, that's an objection and a recommendation for refusal on the basis that it's a fairly insensitive proposal that doesn't really show how this can be a sensitive response to context. I mean, it's short, the building's too tall. It looks like it's going to dominate the existing building at the front. It doesn't respect the kind of hierarchy of predominant building at the front with subservient building behind, for which there's multiple precedents around the city. And then the heritage assessment hasn't been dealt with robustly or comprehensively, so there's no clear understanding of what's important in the area. There's no justification for what's proposed. And then add to that the issues that the committee are raising to do with materials. UPVC windows, I mean, that can't happen in the conservation area anyway. And then there's questions about the appropriateness of the metal cladding, not just for the walls, upper sections of walls, but the roof as well. So I think there's a complete absence of justification for what's proposed. So on that basis, it's a fairly strong objection. Lindsay? Yeah. Thank you. Takes us on Chloe to 10 to 14 St Helens Street.
This is 10 to 14 St Helens. That you're with these buildings. It's for a change of use from restaurant to the direction of 2-storey extension to 4 or 5 apartments and 1 apartment in operation associated interior operations. Reasons for bringing this onto you is obviously the setting grade from St Helens House. There have been previous applications. There was one in 2019 to change the use. 6-bed residential care home, and that was with a 3-storey extension and alterations, and that was approved. And then since then, there was a 2020 application which was withdrawn for the demolition of the existing and direction of a 62-bed student accommodation block. And so that's a bit of the funny history. So, in terms of photographs of the site, we're offered these side elevations, the front elevation of St Helens Street was on the previous slide. And this was the previous elevation, just to let you know, see the areas in the slightly darker shading shows the extension to the building. So going back to the current, here is the proposed site plan. So there are a number of extensions, keeping in a sort of courtyard. So the elevations, so there are big roof lights, not conservation type. UPVC windows being proposed. Proposal to reinforce the elevations, then restore decorative glazing. The rear, as you would have seen on site, some windows, the addition of a number of new windows to the first floor side and an extension to the block on the side to create a 3rd floor with backstop bricks. There's also an extension to the right hand side of that elevation, red stock bricks. Is the one side elevations showing new windows and a new extension proposed. And this is the elevation that faces St Helens House. You've got the end elevation, that row on St Helens Street on the left hand side, the extension linking to the existing block with the extension. Floor plans that we've seen.
Thank you, Chloe. So quite a sort of detailed set of proposals in terms of the intervention, but really based around creating a courtyard in the middle, accommodation around it. Been some moves to differentiate the kind of new and the existing, but essentially, you know, quite a bit of change. But I mean, quite change too from what's a building in a pretty real state and not making much of a contribution to the townscape as things stand. So, to see something happening here. So comments, please.
Well, I welcome the proposal to restore these buildings. Like I said, in rather neglected state. It's sad that previously approved schemes are by the wayside, but I think on the whole it seems a reasonable one. The courtyard's going to be a little small. They are saying it's going to be a space for students to relax in, but the main thing that sort of concerned me was the windows, the UPVC with sort of top opening, particularly on this frontage that we can see here. Not too concerned about the rear frontage. And maybe something a little better facing St Helens House as well.
Yeah, the elevation facing St Helens House is the one with the different kind of fenestration approach. Reasonable together. I think again to sort of try and suggest that that's
Yes,
there's been some new intervention.
Yeah.
I mean, we might debate the appropriateness. I'm sure. Paul, you want to say thanks?
Yeah. No, like you, David, I welcome the fact that those buildings are being going to be restored, which is important. I do have reservations again about the UPVC windows, but I also have reservations about the pattern of fenestration that goes on that particular elevation that we can see there. Now, I don't mind modern intervention. I think it would be quite appropriate there, but that is rather awkward and out of balance with the rest of the compositions. I also have worries about the top floor. In contrast, which you can see on that elevation, top right hand corner there, which seems to be a rather awkward outside dormer stuck on top of what's there. Our heritage gate. Do you have a better elevation of that, Chloe?
It's all we've got.
Yeah, there was an elevation.
And the elevation.
No,
That one, yeah. So you can see that line across the top there. Now that I understand is supposed to be painting awkwardness, a proportion in there. I think that needs handling slightly different.
Yeah, it kind of pops up above the gable.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is retained. So it's like curious.
Some more work needs doing on those.
Yeah.
On those elevations, aren't there?
There is, yeah. But I mean, the sentiment's there. It's just
Yeah, just
the finesse.
it needs to be worked on a bit more, doesn't it?
Yes,
Chris, comments?
I agree with the comments that have been made. Yes, the report now is very sure what its dimensions are. But very feel like sitting in a very tunnel line So
Made them agree something.
whether that could just be of course losing floor space. Be nice for there to be some sitting area. I think it's a shame that that's certainly support me. So, yes, it's a scheme that's capable of being made acceptable. I'm sure we don't do much adjustment. It would be good to see investment on the site sat there for some time.
Okay, any other comments? So I need to, so I mean, I'll summarise what you've said. I think first and foremost that the proposal to rescue and restore, retain buildings is welcome. And the notion of clustering accommodation around a central courtyard is appealing, but the courtyard's very tiny. And I'm practically more generous to at least have the chance of getting some sunlight into it. I think the concerns are to do with the expression architecturally in relation to the elevations and principally the fenestration. So I think the questions are being raised about a different type of fenestration. There's the sense that is a way of expressing a modern intervention. And I think the committee aren't convinced that this is the right way in terms of the fenestration pattern, and then also the expression of that roof extension we're looking at right now seems a little unresolved and heavy. Yes, so we need to decide whether that's an objection subject to those, or I'm more inclined to say no objection, but with those issues that have been highlighted, kind of conditioned or sorry, do you want to say something?
Yes, please. In terms of the materials,
Yeah, new PVC, very concerned about that. So the committee would not support new PVC windows and doors as proposed. So so on that basis, I think we support the scheme, but we'd like to see some refinement of the.
It might be nice to have a visual break as well between the existing and the new. Perhaps a different record to what was saying.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Chloe.
is that a no objection?
It's a no objection.
Yeah.
But with the issues we've highlighted, so it's a no objection on the basis that those issues are addressed in discussion with yourself to just make a better scheme, a more appropriate response, particularly in relation to the elevation that faces St Helens House. Yeah,
Say, though, if you wanted to bring it back to the committee,
yeah, that might be helpful. Okay, Lindsay, hope you've got that. So I think in terms of the agenda, I've got to disappear now.
Yeah.
So I'll leave you to go through those. Thanks, Paul. So it's the other two schemes to discuss, and then that in terms of AOB, I guess you can speak about that. But Chloe, I'm hoping there's going to be an announcement about some support for you.
Yes.
whether that's something that can be discussed or not.
Yes, the principle.
Awesome. Sounds positive, so
Yes.
fingers crossed. I'll get out of your way.
There was item 8 as well.
I'm sorry, I've got to leave the room for that as well. Because,
Okay.
but yes, that is on the,
Yes, yeah.
I've associated with that too, so that's why I thought I'd go and not come back. This time.
It's nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you. So, see you all next time. Thank you.
Cheers.
So, Clarence, Mansfield Road. To you for a brief Zoom.
87 Mansfield Road. This is within the conservation area, the rest of the conservation area. Demolition of existing public house, section of the micro pub and 11 apartments. As well as the Little Trust conservation area, it's opposite the town goods shed, St Mary's goods yard, so the grain warehouse, unit tower, which are all grade 2, as well as the Church of St Paul, along the same stretch of road, Mansfield Road. So there is a heritage statement, and shows that obviously it's well sometime later stone wall photographs which are proposed to be published. So here's the existing and proposed plans that you will see online. You see those buildings which are proposed to go and the proposed building access from Mansfield Road from that road and from side access. So in terms of floor plans, we've got the ground floor and first floor. So the ground floor showing the micro floor associated etc. And the floor plans. So obviously the rear extension is a 2-storey roof. The front itself is a 1-storey. Is the elevation, so the top one is the elevation to Mansfield Road, and the other is the to the side elevation. Proposals are for red water brick on the whole, really different patterns, some homemade, some soldier course, slate effect, tile, vertical tile, cladding, aluminium capping profile, dark grey aluminium windows and doors, aluminium, both rainwater pipes, hoppers, balustrade, etc. So you'll have seen the details online as regards those. Here the other side elevation and the rear elevation. Section 3, which was the slide before. And in terms of the number of contextual elevations have been provided. So here, as you've seen online, top one says existing, you see central location and proposed just below. As you can see the church on the right hand side of this elevation, you look towards it on Mansfield Road. And there was a number of photomontages So there's photo montage, the top two, which look at the existing building and the proposed building along the full stretch. I should just mention that there is a break in terms of the conservation area. It does include a number of those historic terrace, but it doesn't include the modern building flats beyond. And then to the bottom two, that's just a bit of a close up, but you would have seen those. Here's a side elevation. So existing proposed in terms of heights proposed, and a bit of a visual showing. So there is the direction.
Thank you, Claire. So the proposal is basically the loss of the Duke of Clarence pub as it stands at the moment. The building dates back to around the 1880s, we think. It's been hacked around significantly over the years. There's nothing of any historic interest inside the building we reported. And the proposal is to replace it with a fairly modern building with micro pub on the ground floor and apartments on the subsequent floors. It's a very quite a modern interpretation, can be quite dominant on the streetscape next to the cottages. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Chris, I feel it's a step backwards being proposed. The existing building is characterful. It's a landmark, something that people help them to navigate around the city to have places like that. It stands out as a I say it's a step back in the being proposed, but it's uninspiring, I suppose. Really, it's just and anything anywhere sort of building, you know. It certainly wouldn't be one that people would say, "Oh, go, down the road to that particular building and then turn left or whatever," because it's not any significant really in the area. And given that we're talking about conservation, and character is of some importance. It's not a listed building. It's not a locally listed building, as I understand it, but it's in the buffer zone of the World Heritage Site, which is so, yeah, I just feel it's not a proposal that I like at all. Or if it's going to be a replacement, perhaps it ought to be something better than this.
More of a state building.
Yeah.
Well, I felt it sets a precedent really in conservation areas, because you've got basically what is a non-designated heritage asset, which is what we're talking about. And I think it is, that's what it is really. And it's not listed, it's not local. As you say, it's a well-known building in the community. And I think, it sets a precedent for demolition of that sort of building, and I think I'm a bit nervous about that. On the other hand, it's the building that's replacing it is an investment in the city, and okay, it's not got great character, but it ticks all the boxes regards replacing it with a micro and with residential above it. So I think it's a very difficult decision, and I thought it was one that this committee has got to be very mindful of. Yeah, and I think in the heritage statement, design access statement, there was a scheme in there for actually keeping the Duke of York and extending over onto the car.
There was, but there was
But
also,
they didn't take it any further.
well, no, there's a evaluation report as well, which goes into quite detail. They've looked at 3 schemes. One was keeping the existing building, one was extending it, so forth, and the new build. And viability wise, one has to say that none of them actually stood up. But I mean, that's really for not for this committee to consider. We're more concerned about the architecture and the impact on the conservation area, and the impact on the listed buildings.
Yeah.
So if you're saying you think the architecture is inappropriate for that location, then that's what we'll ask.
I think it's it's very much on balance. I think you've got to decide whether you think that demolition of the non-designated heritage asset is worthy of that.
Yeah,
for this building.
I have to
Which is what
say,
this was saying.
yeah, I have to say, I actually disagree that the building, the existing pub, whilst it's white rendered, there's no great architectural character. There's been alterations to the ground.
That's architecture.
No, that's historic.
It's just the
It's
fact
just
that
about
it's a
there and
community, well-known community building, isn't it?
yeah, no doubt everyone's off the railway.
Depends if you drink.
Yeah.
I do drink, but you can't drink there because it's a closed pub. Like one on the corner, the ended up as the water something or other, the bridge. They're closed pubs and they're not viable as buildings. And I agree with every word Chris said, but none of it was a reason for refusal. You can't refuse permission to something because it's a landmark that you tell people to go past on their way to Alfreton Road, is it? I think it's very tough. It surprises me that micro pubs are catching on and pubs are going. Why not sit in more comfort rather than a tiny little room? But that is the case, and it's clearly working in Chester Green, where there's already a micro pub that's very popular, just up from the Coach and Horses, which, well, less said about the better. But it's the building that's going in its place that we really need to look at. And I was looking at that in the context of not terribly wonderful City Point or whatever it's called, really along there. And it's as though the modern bit of Derby is heading towards Chester Green, isn't it? And various bits are going. We've already given permission to places on the other side of the road that aren't actually built yet. We don't know whether they will, but it's a question, I think, of where the line stops. And all right, we've got the edge of the conservation area, but that actually includes quite a bit of the modern bit. So I would suggest that we go as far as the roundabout and no further with these modern ones, which includes this. And when you get to the green, then everything has to be a bit. Yeah, but we can't really make rules like that. It's just,
But you also got the prospect that there are listed buildings opposite,
Yes.
and there's St Paul's right next door.
Yeah. Which needs to be.
It's the impact having on them, which the report quite clearly identifies them as listed buildings.
Yeah.
The impact is low.
But have we found any reason to refuse? I don't think there is.
I personally don't think that there is, apart from the style of the architecture.
Yeah, you probably find lots of others like it. Sorry.
Well, is the impact low? When you look at that picture of it in situ, it does feel quite dominating, doesn't it, of those surrounding buildings?
In terms of scale,
Yeah, and not very imaginative. I mean, it's not a particularly,
Not so building.
you know, when you look at the other buildings around it.
Yeah.
So you're uncomfortable. Is anybody else uncomfortable with the scale
Yeah.
and the quality? The quality.
It's not even got it. If it had a sort of an industrial look, it would fit in. But it's not.
Picking up
Is it?
more on the railway sort of image. I can see that there are elements in this design which pick up on the scheme prepared for Ada Bliss design,
Yes.
but possibly not handled in such a clever way. So, David,
Paul, just to say that I would agree with what Robin says, that you know, just because a building has been there a while doesn't mean that it's got to be always there. And I think with this building, it's been knocked about so much, it's damaged any character that it might have had. And the last thing we need is yet another derelict pub.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to go into the bridge, and I could never quite understand why that closed. Of course, the flood prevention works, I think, were the final tool. Whether anything ever will happen to it, I don't know. And I think that's a pub much more worthy of being saved than this one. I have to admit that I've been past that many a time and never felt the inclination to go inside.
No.
So I agree on that score. I mean, as far as architecture is concerned, certainly it could be better. I suspect that the developers wouldn't want to spend any money. So whether they could improve the design using the same budget is another matter. But otherwise, you're going to have a derelict site if no one.
No. So, are we in agreement that the building itself has no merit and can be replaced, but we're not in agreement with the style of architecture and the scale? Given that the viability, the scale of it, I'm sure is driven by the viability equation that's been prepared, the number of units that you can get out of it.
I mean, it could be worse. They could be asking for 6. For
Yeah. Could do better. Could do better.
It's the least worst.
So, are we going for an objection then on the basis of like an improved design?
Well, we said about scale, didn't we?
About scale.
maybe the alternative would be if someone were to put a nice residential house. Someone might be prepared to want it, a house in that area, and architect designed, spend that extra to achieve that. That's not.
We've got to
presumably
judge
the
what
plan.
we've got in front.
I
of
know,
us.
I know.
That's what happened.
Wanted down the main road like that,
Near a police station. Yeah.
The lighthouses on that.
Sorry, Claire, does that give you some direction?
Yeah, so I've got objection in terms of,
Design.
presume in terms of impact on the conservation area and settings to build. But pre-design needed in terms of scale, detailed design.
So we move on to 16, 17 Friegate. The land to the rear of Zizi's. Chloe, give us a resume.
So yes, about 16 to 17 Friegate, grade 2 listed, 17th century within the city centre conservation area. This is a change of use of part of this building from a restaurant and the erection of a 2-storey extension to form 5 apartments in all and 1 apartment in multiple occupation and associated internal uses. There's the building site. So there's the existing site plan and the proposed, and you'll note the location of the new extension. And there's a few alterations which I'll point out as we go through. So looking at the demolition plans, the ground floor is very little change to the existing fabric. Other than proposed to be removed and the rebuilding of a wall to the rear of the site, and to take some photographs of that, as you can see from both sides. See that the cobbles. So this proposed wall is supposed to be removed in its entirety. There is some cracking here. There isn't a structural engineer's report at the moment. Moving on to the first floor, some limited wall changes and door changes in this area. So there's the removal of a pantry. So that's I'll be pointing out most of the doorway adjacent to this one to create new wall within this particular unit. So this is the scale of the alterations. There are some new openings and a couple of walls being proposed to be removed. To the top floor, 3rd floor, roof lights proposed, some changes to lime ash floor back to allow access up the stairs, and that's the photograph below. So it looks like this has been, there was a headroom was there originally. It's been resurfaced, recovered with floor. So just to point that out, it's the staircase is to the left hand side. So there's some slight changes to allow the headroom. And they also mentioned non-original roof light to be removed. So this is a photograph of So just moving to the proposal plans. So I pointed out most of the changes to the historic fabric, but obviously there's the proposed extension to the rear of the yard. So you can see some blue on the plan. And then there are a number of other blue lines on the drawing to the 1st floor showing the new partitions being proposed to form things like WCs, etc., and the corridor which I mentioned earlier. So just to give you an idea of the proposal for the new extension in terms of its location and proposed materials. So dark grey, little stainless steel cladding to the upper floor, to extension and water brick is proposed. So we've seen these online, but this is the elevation, rear elevation showing the new extension, as well as the intruding part of the extension as it is on a sort of corner. This is counted. And the second, third floor plans that you would have seen. So that's the quick summary.
Thank you, Chloe. So basically, change of use, conversion to 5 apartments, some fairly minor alterations to the existing listed building, and an extension to the far right hand side, as you can see up there. There's quite a comprehensive heritage statement, design and access statement with proposals. Open it up for discussion. Any comments?
You go first.
You go.
Well, yeah, I was fairly content. Thought a lot of thought to the analysis of the situation and how things could change, which was very encouraging. So I think been carefully considered. And so I think we met many aspects of the scheme that are appropriate, really. The size, the scale, chimneys, and the roofing, roof covering. So I think very slate. Yeah, but so that's going to be sort of a noticeable feature of site. So that's all.
I was to say, I've got no objection to it. I thought it was a good scheme. The only thing I was a bit surprised about the small amount of amenity space on the side. And the extension seemed to sort of cover whatever there was.
It's city living, I suppose.
But is it one of these things where it's the viability study? You've got to get the last three units on the site to make it happen.
I actually think that little extension actually forms quite a nice full stop to that end of the site. I think it's probably worth noting that, as Chloe pointed out, you've got cobbles in that area, and I think we'd ask that those cobbles that we use somewhere else in that particular area.
I just think it's been greedy. It's three units too many on the site. Anyway, if you just look at the site plan, see what I mean. There's no space for, and it's sitting out of space at all, or even pulling a van into the site.
Mind you,
Yeah, but then
would you really want to sit out in that?
But that's just what I think.
it's the impact that has on the listed building, and I think I have to say that the impact that it does have is minimal. So, and the alterations to the listed building, again, the impact is very low. So I think from that aspect, we have to applaud the scheme. Say yes.
Well, that's just mine.
No, fine.
I just think there's little or no space.
Yeah.
It's the nature of it. I'm quite happy with that extension. It's sort of, in a way, logical, really, because these extensions have been added over the years already. This is just taking it another step.
Yeah, it is. It's that sort of diminishing scale as you go down to that end. I think it forms quite a nice full stop.
Yeah.
It is more down George Street.
Kind is that end up.
Robin, Sue?
Happy with it. I've been in the, the Anthony Gill townhouses. It was the flats at the front, and they were in a pretty bad state. I think this is somebody who's taken on the idea in improving the whole place, which is good for the listed building. It's good for the conservation area. They're obviously found a use for it. No, I think it's good. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah.
No problem.
It's like they could get a restaurant back in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A decent restaurant.
Put the note in the application. That covers all the items for consideration on the agenda, other than the item 8, I think it was, the city centre vision, which I think is put there as from a legal point of view, just to make sure that we've recorded. Has anybody got any comment to make on that?
We discussed it last time, didn't
We did, yes, that's right, yeah. It reflects the input. Okay, any comments from anybody? Any other business? No? Thank you very much all for attending, and I'll formally close the meeting then.
People.